So I acquired 3 roughly 36 by 15 inch installation hole windows that are awning type that crank out. The screen here has been removed. The trim ring is laying just on top of the window. So what we have to take into account is this thickness between the trim ring and the clamp ring on the window that goes outside the van. So in my case, I mocked that up with some scrap materials, and I'll show you that. So this is difficult to see, but I have the window laying on the bench, and I applied the light colored line there is butyl tape. There it is. And then I had a scrap piece of metal from my roof vent. I've got 1-inch polyiso. This turned out to be 1.25 inches. That's going to be my window frame thickness out of wood. And then this top piece of wood is a 1/4 inch spacer for my finished wall material, possibly tongue and groove pine. And then my clamp ring on the outside, which will be the inside actually. And so I used a few different scraps, and I installed 2 or 3 screws along a 6 or 8 inch section to fine tune what I thought would be the correct thickness of materials. So in my case, I'm going to put the 1-inch polyiso insulation, foil face both sides, against the van skin. The window will come in from the outside. Then I'm going to build my frame out of 1.25 inches thick, and I'll just do 1.5 inches wide 2x4 thickness for convenience. I will put in these shims when I install my clamp ring, because the windows will get installed well before my finished wall. So here's my wooden trim piece. This will go on top of my insulation, the closed cell, and behind the clamp ring. This frame has been constructed with screws and glue, and I cut some 45-degree blocks to go in the corners to take up the gap. And so here I've dropped the clamp ring into my opening. I used the dimensions of the clamp ring to determine my wooden frame. The clamp ring outside where the trim will go is actually a little bit larger than my window hole would need to be. So I would say measure clamp rings and windows to figure out the best frame size for the inside, as well as the best hole for the outside. This window frame, the wooden part here, is about 1/8 of an inch, 3/16 larger than my clamp ring to give me just a little bit of play. And so here I'm showing my frame of insulation. This is made of the 1-inch polyiso. You can see the thickness here at 1 inch. So that's going to go against the inside of the van skin. And then on top of that will be my 1.25 inch thick frame, and about 1/4 inch of finished wall all underneath the clamp ring, which should be just the right thickness with the van skin and the butyl tape on the outside to compress nicely. So, but this 1-inch foam will give me some thermal break between the van skin and all of my wood. And my wood frame is assembled and primed. That primer will help me with a little bit of moisture if that ends up getting on that. So tomorrow is a big day. We'll cut a hole and put a window in. I've already made a cardboard template of just a tiny bit larger than the window hole size will need to be. So at this point, I've set my window frame in the opening and centered it, which is just my preference. And I've drawn a blue line on the inside of my wooden frame just for reference, but it really won't matter. I'm going to cut from the outside so I can swing the saw easier around the curves. The green tape was put in approximately at center, and you can see the tiny hole that I've drilled right on the line. And so that is at the center top of my window. And then I'm going to go outside and take my cardboard template, put the center top on that hole, and then level it with the body lines so that it's straight, and draw my line on the outside. And here is the hole on the outside. I've got my cardboard template. I've marked the center of that template, and I'm going to line it up right over the hole because I really want the cut to be at the edge of the cardboard, not beyond. And so I've taped it by leveling with these body contours. And then you can see I've drawn a line with the blue Sharpie. It's hard to see on this granite color. But I'm going to go back over it with some painter's tape, and then I will follow the painter's tape with my saw. So after I got the line marked on the van paint, I've gone back with painter's tape and taped over the line so the edge of the tape exactly covered my marker line. And then taped the corners, although I didn't follow the line exactly. I'll just follow the line with the saw. So that gives me a nice contrast of a line to follow with the saw. I've cut the top half. I drilled about a 3/8 inch starter hole to get my blade in. I'm just using a jigsaw saber saw with a metal blade, about 24 teeth per inch. And so I've got the top half cut. I'm going to add some pieces of tape across the seam, across the line I've cut, so it won't vibrate so much, and I'll cut the bottom. And so the panel has been cut out and removed. I will test fit the window and make sure I don't need to trim my hole at all before filing the rough edges and touching up the bare metal cut with a little bit of primer to seal it. But we're on our way. So I've pulled the tape off of my hole. I used 3/16 thick butyl tape on the back of that window flange. You can see the light colored butyl there on the edge of the flange showing. And it's a little sticky, so I've stuck that into the opening, aligned it high and centered, and then reused some of my painter's tape to lightly hold the window in place so I can go inside and install my foam, my wooden frame, my shims, and then a few screws on the trim ring. And so here's the inside. My masking paper is just to keep metal shavings from cutting, from getting into all the crevices in the body. So I've put my 1-inch foam, just a little bit of adhesive against the metal skin around the window. On top of that, the wooden frame, and then I'll shim for the thickness of my finish wall and apply the trim ring. And just work my screws tighter and tighter until I feel like I've got a good seal and squeezed out some butyl. Okay, I've drilled my pilot holes for my number 8 by 3/4 inch screws for the trim ring. I've installed those and sort of worked the torque up little by little, and I've got a nice little squeeze of butyl tape out of the edge, and so I'll clean that off with a plastic knife or scraper, and hopefully we'll get a good seal. It's a little cold here, but I think with some warmer temps everything will be fine. And here's the inside. You can see that my trim little shims will take up the space that my wall material will be, same thickness. So the window should be nice and clamped tight both now and later. And then the finish wall will extend out, and that's still to be determined. I did learn a few things on this window install. My template for cutting the outside hole was good, but I noticed when I set the window in, I was a little wider than I needed to be on the corners. Still have a good seal, but smaller the hole, the better. So I'll adjust my template a little bit. I've got 2 more windows to put in, and so that will make those installations just a little bit tighter. And also, once I set the window in the hole before my interior trim and foam went in, I ran a little bead of the Sikaflex 221 sealant along the place where the window frame meets the skin behind my insulation. Just a little bit of additional caulk and sealant there in case the butyl maybe is not just perfect. But I think overall everything will be really good. And I'll also get a chance to see this in the weather before I insulate and put up my wall material. So that should help. Anyway, and so I've got the 2 windows installed on the passenger side. And the height of these is the same, but it was really determined by the slider. If you notice here on the slider, the horizontal brace is a little bit lower than the horizontal brace on the rest of the body. So what I did was I made my top spacer 1 inch high instead of 1.5 inches, and then pushed the window as high as I could into the slider. Once that one was cut and installed, then I came back to this next window and set the position as far forward as I could and still have room for framing, and then went outside and measured and marked to cut the hole the same height. So the 2 windows are the same height, and actually this alignment is pretty nice, because when the slider is completely open, the 2 windows nearly line up, so your vision is not blocked from the galley area with those 2 windows lined up when the slider's open. And so now look from the outside. The slider window is centered, and then the window behind is like, say, scooted forward. You can see it's a ways forward in that back panel, but our bed will be at the back, and don't really want a window with the cold draft possibly there. My butyl tape is still squeezing out. I'll give that a little time in the sun, and then I'll trim that off. So I'm really happy with the 3 windows, and hope this video in some way was helpful to others. Thanks, and happy trails.